Clara's story began in a little countryside town surrounded by wide fields, dusty roads, and hills that turned golden in the evening sun. From the outside, the town looked peaceful, but for Clara, life had been filled with silence, loneliness, and whispers that followed her wherever she went. She was an orphan, a word that seemed to carry weight heavier than her small shoulders could bear. People never just saw her as a girl. They always reminded her that she was the orphan. That was the name the town gave her, and it followed her everywhere. Her parents had passed away when she was only a small child, too young to fully understand what loss meant, but old enough to feel the emptiness it left behind. Relatives took her in, but they did not treat her as their own. To them, she was another mouth to feed, another set of clothes to wash, and another responsibility to carry. While their own children were given the best food and new clothes, Clara had to make do with whatever was left. She wore dresses patched over and over again, and when shoes tore, she had to keep wearing them until they almost fell apart. Clara was not bitter. She was quiet, patient, and humble even when treated unfairly. She did the chores she was given without complaint. She woke before sunrise to fetch water, sweep the yard, and help with laundry. When others were playing, she was working. When others were eating heartily, she was often eating the smallest portion. But even with this hard life, there was something gentle about her presence. She had soft brown eyes that always looked as though they carried stories no one asked to hear, and a smile that, though rare, could brighten a heavy day. As Clara grew older, she became more aware of the way people looked at her. Girls her age were beginning to attract suitors. They were preparing for marriage, wearing bright dresses and laughing as they shared secrets about love. But for Clara, the whispers grew louder. Some said, "No man will want her, she has no dowry." Others whispered, "Who will marry a girl with no family name to honor?" Every time she passed the marketplace, she could feel eyes following her, some with pity, others with scorn. In her heart, Clara longed for something simple, to belong, to be loved, and to have a family of her own. It wasn't riches she dreamed of, nor fancy dresses or jewels. She only wanted a place where she was no longer seen as a burden, but as someone worth keeping. Yet each day seemed to remind her that such a dream was far away. Still, Clara did not let her hardships turn her cruel. She often helped neighbors without being asked. If someone was sick, she would bring them soup. If children were crying, she would comfort them with gentle words. When an old woman struggled to carry her basket in the market, Clara would step forward and carry it for her. She gave even when she had little. The townspeople noticed these acts, but most still believed kindness alone was not enough to make her a desirable bride. The seasons passed slowly, each year adding to her age and the whispers about her future. Clara sometimes sat by the window at night, watching the moonlight touch the fields. She would imagine her parents still there telling her stories, reminding her she was loved. She held on to those small dreams, letting them keep her heart soft when the world around her was hard. Deep down, she wondered if anyone would ever see her not as the orphan, but as simply Clara. Life in the town was small, but within it lived a man named Samuel. He was a poor rancher who owned a small piece of land at the edge of the village. Samuel was known for his hard-working nature. He rose before dawn to care for his animals, fix fences, and plow the land. People respected his honesty but often pitied his situation. He had no wealth, no family left, and his ranch barely gave him enough to survive. Though he was poor, he carried himself with quiet strength. He never complained about his life, and he treated others with fairness. Samuel noticed Clara many times from a distance. When he went to the market, he would see her helping an old man with his cart. When he walked through the village, he would catch her kneeling to comfort a child who had fallen. He saw how she was treated by her relatives, how they sent her on errands while others sat comfortably. Samuel saw her kindness, her patience, and her dignity, even when the world gave her none. He admired her quietly, but he never spoke a word to her beyond polite greetings. In his mind, what could a poor rancher like him offer a girl who had already suffered so much? He thought she deserved more than the little he could give. Clara, on the other hand, barely noticed Samuel at first. To her, he was just another villager who worked hard to survive. She respected him for his honesty, but did not imagine him playing a role in her life. Her mind was often too burdened with her own worries about the future. She wondered if she would spend her whole life moving from one relative's home to another, always feeling like she did not belong. The thought pained her, but she kept those fears locked in her heart. One day, as Clara walked back from the fields with a basket of vegetables, she heard two women talking near the well. They spoke loudly, not caring that she could hear. "That girl will never marry," one of them said. "Who would take her? She has no dowry, no family, nothing." The other replied, "She will probably end up serving others for the rest of her life." Clara kept walking, her face burning, but she did not cry. She had grown used to such words. Yet deep inside, a small part of her heart ached in silence. Samuel happened to be nearby that day. He overheard the cruel words and saw Clara's face as she passed by. He felt a tug in his chest, a quiet anger at the way she was judged for things beyond her control. He wished he had the courage to speak up for her, but he stayed silent, convincing himself that perhaps it was not his place. Still, the image of Clara's hurt expression stayed with him long after that day. Clara continued her routine, living one day at a time, never knowing that someone had begun to see her in a different light. The town might have dismissed her, but Samuel's eyes noticed what others ignored. To him, she was not just an orphan. She was a young woman of strength, dignity, and kindness. A woman far more valuable than the cruel whispers claimed. As days turned into months, both Clara and Samuel carried their quiet lives forward, unaware that fate was slowly weaving their stories together. She longed for belonging, and he longed for someone to share his lonely life. Neither of them knew that their paths, shaped by hardship and quiet strength, would one day join in a way that would change both their lives forever. Samuel lived a quiet life on his small ranch at the edge of the town. His home was a little wooden house with a roof that sometimes leaked when heavy rains came. Around it stretched a few acres of land where his cattle grazed and where he planted small crops. The soil was not rich and the animals were not many, but it was enough to keep him alive. Every morning, long before the sun rose, he would step outside, his boots sinking into the damp earth, and begin his work. He milked the cows, fed the chickens, fixed fences, and cared for the land that his parents had left him. People in town respected him for his honesty and hard-working ways, but when they spoke of him, there was always a shadow of pity in their voices. "Poor Samuel," they would say. "He works so hard, yet he has nothing." He was not rich, and in a world where wealth and family names carried great weight, Samuel was seen as a man who would never rise beyond his simple life. Still, he did not complain. He was proud of the little he had, for he had earned it through sweat and labor. Despite his loneliness, Samuel had a calm nature. He found peace in the sound of the wind moving through the grass and in the sight of the stars scattered across the sky at night. But sometimes, in the quiet moments when he sat by the fire after a long day, he felt the emptiness of his life. The small house seemed larger at night, and the silence reminded him that he had no one to share it with. His parents were gone, he had no siblings, and though neighbors greeted him kindly, they had their own families and their own lives. Samuel longed for companionship, though he rarely admitted it even to himself. It was during these moments of silence that he often thought of Clara. He had seen her many times in the village. At first, she was just another familiar face, a young woman who lived under the care of her relatives. But slowly, Samuel began to notice details that others overlooked. He saw how hard she worked, how she always walked with a quiet dignity even when others treated her poorly. He saw how she bent down to tie a child's shoe, or how she stayed back after gatherings to help clean while the others left. He saw how her face lit up with a small smile when she managed to brighten someone else's day. These were things that no dowry could measure, but Samuel knew they were worth more than gold. One afternoon, Samuel was in the market selling a small basket of eggs. He stood behind his cart, his hat shading his face from the sun, when he noticed Clara walking by. She was carrying a heavy basket filled with vegetables, her thin arms straining under the weight. A group of young men sitting nearby laughed quietly, whispering to each other as she passed. Samuel frowned. He knew their words were not kind, though Clara pretended not to hear. She walked past with her head held high, her eyes fixed forward as though their cruelty could not touch her. But Samuel saw the slight tremble in her lips, the effort it took to appear strong. Something in his heart stirred, a feeling of both admiration and protectiveness. For a moment he thought of calling out to her, offering to carry her basket, but he stopped himself. What if she thought he was only pitying her? What if others mocked them both? Samuel lowered his eyes and stayed silent, though the image of her thin figure carrying the heavy load stayed with him for the rest of the day. Clara, on her side, had little reason to notice Samuel. She knew him as the quiet rancher, polite but distant. She had heard people speak of his struggles, how his land barely supported him, and how he lived alone with no family left. In her mind, he was like her in many ways, alone, overlooked, and judged by the world. Yet she never thought their lives would cross beyond polite greetings. Time moved on, and with it, the gap between Clara and the other young women of the village grew larger. Many of the girls she had grown up with were now married or preparing to be. They wore bright dresses, their fingers heavy with jewelry, and spoke with excitement about their new lives. Clara listened quietly but felt the sting of being left behind. Suitors came for others but never for her. Her relatives reminded her constantly that she had no dowry, that no man of good standing would want her. Some even joked that she would grow old in their house, always serving, never being claimed. The words hurt, but Clara endured them with patience, though each passing year deepened her longing for a place to belong. Samuel often overheard the way people spoke about Clara. At community gatherings, he would notice the way others dismissed her, how they looked past her as though she were invisible. He saw the way her relatives used her like a servant, sending her on endless errands while they sat comfortably. The unfairness of it burned in his chest, though he kept his feelings hidden. One evening, after a long day of work, Samuel sat on the porch of his small house, watching the sun sink into the horizon. He thought of Clara, of the loneliness in her eyes that mirrored his own. He wondered what it would be like if two people who had nothing found comfort in each other. The thought was simple yet powerful, but almost immediately he shook his head. How could he, a poor rancher with so little, think of offering himself to someone like her? Would she not deserve more, a better home, a more secure future? Samuel told himself it was foolish to dream, yet the thought returned night after night. Meanwhile, Clara's life grew heavier. The town never let her forget her place. When she went to the market, people whispered. When she walked by, children repeated the word they had heard from adults: orphan. She carried these scars silently. At night, she sometimes cried into her pillow, asking herself if she would ever be more than the girl no one wanted. Yet each morning she rose again, tied her hair back, and faced the day with quiet courage. She refused to let the bitterness of others turn her cold. It was during this time that fate seemed to prepare the ground for change. Samuel began to notice her more often, not just in the market but in the fields, on the road, and at gatherings, and each time the same thought returned to him. Here was a young woman who deserved more than what life had given her. She deserved love, dignity, and a family. And though he doubted himself, Samuel could not silence the quiet voice inside that told him he might be the one to give her those things. In the heart of that small town, two lives continued to move in quiet circles, both weighed down by loneliness, both overlooked by others, yet both holding qualities that no one else cared to see. Clara carried kindness and Samuel carried loyalty. Neither knew it yet, but their paths were slowly being drawn together as though the world was preparing them for a moment that would surprise everyone, including themselves. The years kept passing, and Clara's life remained much the same. She worked from sunrise until nightfall, her hands always busy with tasks others pushed onto her. She fetched water, cooked meals, mended clothes, and looked after children who were not her own. In the eyes of her relatives, she was useful but never cherished. In the eyes of the town, she was invisible, unless people wanted to whisper cruel words about her future. Each season that passed seemed to weigh more heavily on her shoulders, because with every birthday she became less desirable to the world around her. Suitors no longer even glanced in her direction. People began to joke that she would live out her days in service, always belonging to someone else's household but never having one of her own. Despite the loneliness, Clara carried herself with quiet dignity. She refused to let the cruel laughter of others break her spirit, yet deep inside she longed for someone to see her, truly see her for the person she was, not the orphan they labeled her as. She wanted to be chosen, not out of pity but because someone genuinely wanted her by their side. She wanted to feel the comfort of belonging, the safety of knowing she was loved. These dreams lived in her heart, even when the world gave her little reason to hope. Samuel watched all this from a distance. He had grown used to the rhythm of his days, but the thought of Clara lingered in his mind more often than he cared to admit. Whenever he saw her at the market, he noticed how she carried herself with grace even when people ignored her or spoke behind her back. Whenever he passed by her house, he noticed how she worked harder than anyone else, never complaining, never demanding recognition. And whenever he caught sight of her eyes, those deep brown eyes that always looked a little tired but still carried warmth, his heart stirred with emotions he had no words for. One particular day, the town gathered in the square for a festival. It was a celebration held once every year, when music filled the air and people danced, laughed, and shared food. Clara, as usual, had been sent by her relatives to help with all the preparations. She arranged tables, carried baskets, and served food while others enjoyed themselves. She wore a simple dress, clean but plain, and her hair tied neatly back. While other young women wore ribbons and bright fabrics, Clara looked like a servant among them. But Samuel, standing near the edge of the crowd, saw something no one else seemed to notice. To him, she was the most graceful person there, not because of what she wore, but because of the calm strength she carried within her. As the festival went on, Clara tried to keep herself busy to avoid feeling out of place. She smiled politely when people spoke to her, but she could not escape the whispers she overheard. "Poor girl, no one will marry her," one woman said. "She is getting older and still no man has claimed her," another added. Clara's heart tightened, but she kept working, pretending she had not heard. It was at that moment Samuel did something that surprised even himself. He could no longer stay silent. He stepped forward from the crowd and walked toward Clara. The chatter of the villagers softened as people noticed him moving with purpose. He stopped beside her and spoke in a steady voice that carried across the gathering. "Enough," he said firmly, turning to face the small group who had been whispering. "You speak of her as though she has no worth, but you are blind to what she truly is." The villagers fell quiet, stunned by his boldness. Clara froze, her hands clutching the edge of the basket she was carrying. Samuel looked at her then, his eyes steady and filled with sincerity. "Clara," he said, his voice softer now but still strong enough for everyone to hear, "I have watched you. I have seen your kindness, your strength, and your patience. I have seen how you carry yourself with dignity even when people treat you unfairly. You are worth more than any dowry, more than any riches, and if no one else will see that, then let it be known that I do. I want to give you my last name, not out of pity, but because I see you for who you are. I claim you as my wife." The square fell into stunned silence. Some gasped, some laughed in disbelief, and others whispered to each other in shock. Clara stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hardly believe what she had just heard. All her life she had been overlooked, dismissed, and told she was unwanted. And now, in front of the whole town, a man had stepped forward and chosen her, not because she begged, not because she was pitied, but because he truly saw her worth. Her relatives were the first to react. They exchanged confused glances, unsure whether to be angry or relieved. On one hand, they would no longer have the burden of caring for her. On the other, they had expected no one to ever take her, and Samuel's sudden claim embarrassed them in front of the community. But Samuel stood tall, unaffected by their judgment. He knew what he wanted, and for once in his life he was determined not to let fear hold him back. Clara looked at Samuel, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. She had never spoken to him beyond polite greetings. She knew of him, knew he was a rancher who lived alone and struggled to survive, but she had never imagined he would see her in this way. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For a moment, she wondered if this was some kind of dream, a cruel trick her mind was playing. But then she saw the steady honesty in Samuel's eyes, and she felt something shift deep within her. Someone had chosen her. Someone had seen her heart when the world only saw her lack. The whispers around them grew louder. A poor rancher marrying an orphan? What a strange pair. They have nothing, how will they survive? Some even laughed, but Samuel's voice cut through the noise once again. Let them say what they will, he declared. I am not ashamed. I choose her, and that is enough for me. His words carried weight, firm and unshakable, and though the villagers did not understand, they could not deny the courage it took for him to speak them. Clara's heart trembled as she realized the truth. For the first time, someone wanted her not as a servant, not as a burden, but as a partner. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back, afraid to break the moment. She whispered softly, almost too quietly for anyone to hear, "Why me?" Samuel heard her, and his answer was simple. "Because you are worth more than the world has ever told you, and I would rather share my little with you than live with much alone." The villagers stared, some in disbelief, others with a quiet admiration they would never admit aloud. What they had witnessed was not ordinary. It was rare and powerful. Clara had been unwanted by all, yet in that moment she became the one person who was truly chosen. Samuel, the poor rancher no one thought capable of offering much, had given her something greater than wealth: his name, his loyalty, and his courage. From that day forward, nothing in Clara's life would ever be the same. Their wedding was nothing like the grand celebration some people dreamed of. There were no elaborate halls, no golden decorations, and no musicians to fill the air with fancy tunes. Instead, it was held in the small clearing near Samuel's ranch, where the soft grass met the edge of the forest. The sun shone gently through the trees, casting patterns of light across the ground. A few neighbors and close friends came to witness the union, people who had always respected both Samuel and Clara for their honesty, kindness, and hard work. Even though it was simple, the day felt filled with warmth and hope, a quiet celebration of love that went beyond wealth, status, or appearances. Clara wore a dress that had been passed down from a neighbor, cleaned and pressed carefully. It was plain, with no ribbons or lace, but to her it felt like a treasure. She tied her hair back simply, letting a few strands fall loosely around her face, and for the first time in her life, she felt like the center of someone's world. Samuel, standing beside her in his best shirt, looked at her with pride, admiration, and something deeper he had never allowed himself to name. He was not wealthy, but he had something more important: a heart full of courage, honesty, and love for Clara. As the ceremony began, Clara felt her hands tremble slightly. She had lived so many years feeling invisible, unwanted, and dismissed. Yet now she stood there, chosen by a man who had nothing material to offer, yet gave her something far greater: his respect, his name, and his heart. Samuel held her hands gently and smiled, his eyes reflecting the seriousness and sincerity of his promise. The words they exchanged were simple, heartfelt, and full of meaning. Each vow spoke not of wealth or riches, but of shared labor, mutual care, and unwavering loyalty. The villagers who had once whispered cruelly about Clara watched quietly, unsure what to say. Some were surprised, others skeptical, but as they looked at the couple, they began to see something different. Here were two people who had endured hardship, who had faced loneliness and judgment, yet stood together proudly, ready to face life as partners. Samuel and Clara's bond, though humble, carried a strength that no gold could buy. Their courage to choose love despite the world's judgment began to soften even the hardest hearts around them. After the ceremony, life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that was both simple and fulfilling. Clara learned to care for the animals with Samuel's guidance. She fed the chickens, milked the cows, and helped with planting and harvesting crops. Samuel worked tirelessly, repairing fences, tending the fields, and keeping the animals safe. Though the work was hard, they shared it willingly, each helping the other without complaint. Every day brought new challenges: rainstorms that flooded the fields, broken tools that needed repair, and animals that grew sick or stubborn. Yet together they met each problem with patience, laughter, and a shared sense of responsibility. The house, small and wooden, slowly began to feel like a home. Clara cooked meals over a simple stove, filling the house with the smell of bread, soup, and herbs. Samuel made sure the house was warm and safe, repairing leaks and carrying water when the well was far. Each evening they would sit together, tired but content, sharing stories of the day. Sometimes they laughed until their sides ached. Sometimes they sat in quiet companionship, simply enjoying the presence of someone who understood them. It was not a life of luxury, but it was rich in ways neither had ever known before. Neighbors began to notice the change in both Clara and Samuel. The girl who had once been overlooked now carried herself with confidence. She laughed more openly, helped others without hesitation, and even spoke up when she saw injustice in the village. Samuel, once seen as just a poor rancher, gained respect for the way he had chosen someone not for her wealth or status, but for her heart. Their partnership became an example, showing the community that love and kindness could be more powerful than gold or family name. As the seasons passed, the ranch began to thrive. They planted more crops, tended the animals carefully, and learned new ways to make the land productive. Samuel's hard work, combined with Clara's dedication, slowly transformed the barren patches into green fields. The small farm became a place of abundance, not just for food, but for happiness and contentment. Their days were long and sometimes exhausting, but they met each one with determination and shared joy. The life they built together was honest, simple, and deeply fulfilling. Over time, the love between Clara and Samuel grew in ways neither had expected. What had started as admiration and courage blossomed into a deep emotional bond. Samuel admired Clara's resilience and patience, and Clara respected Samuel's honesty, strength, and unwavering commitment. They supported each other through difficulties and celebrated even the smallest successes together. Every day, their trust in each other grew stronger, and the respect they shared created a foundation that would carry them through any hardship. The town slowly changed its view as well. People who had once whispered about Clara's orphan status began to see her in a new light. They admired her for the courage she had shown in embracing this life with Samuel, and for the kindness she extended to others despite her own struggles. The whispers of pity and scorn faded, replaced by quiet respect. Even those who had doubted Samuel's choice eventually realized that he had seen something in Clara that they had all overlooked. In the eyes of the villagers, the two of them had become a symbol of strength, determination, and the power of seeing the true value in someone's heart. As the years went on, Clara and Samuel welcomed children into their lives. They raised them with love, patience, and care, teaching them to be hardworking, kind, and honest. Clara often thought about the childhood she had lost and how different life could have been if someone had chosen her sooner. She wanted her children to grow up in a home where love was abundant, where they felt valued and protected, and where hard work was honored. Samuel shared these lessons, showing by example how courage, honesty, and dedication could build a life full of meaning, even without wealth or status. Clara also found ways to help others in the community. She never forgot the pain of being overlooked, and she made it her mission to lift up those who were ignored or judged unfairly. She helped widows, comforted lonely children, and offered food to those in need. Samuel supported her in these efforts, offering his labor and resources whenever possible. Together, they became pillars of the community, people others came to for guidance, support, and inspiration. Though their lives were far from easy, every challenge they faced strengthened their bond. Storms destroyed crops, animals fell ill, and there were times when hunger or fatigue threatened to overwhelm them. Yet each obstacle was met together, side by side, with a determination that was unshakable. The hardships that might have broken others only deepened their love and commitment to each other. In their unity, they discovered a richness of life that no money could provide. By the time their children were grown, the small ranch had become a thriving home. The house was filled with laughter, stories, and the warmth of family. The fields were green, the animals healthy, and the land productive. Samuel and Clara had created a life that was not measured by wealth, but by love, resilience, and the joy of sharing every moment together. Their story, once marked by loneliness and hardship, had become one of hope, courage, and the power of choosing love in a world that often ignores true worth. In the end, Clara, the girl who had once been unwanted, and Samuel, the poor rancher who had nothing to offer in the eyes of others, built a life that few could imagine. They found happiness not through riches or fame, but through partnership, respect, and the courage to see the value in each other when no one else did. Their home became a sanctuary of love, a place where the past pains were replaced with new joys, and where every day brought the promise of a better tomorrow. The villagers, who had once doubted them, could not help but respect the life they had built together, and their story became one whispered with admiration and hope for generations to come. As the years passed, Samuel and Clara's life together continued to flourish in ways they had never imagined when they first stood side by side in the small clearing near the ranch. Their love, once a quiet spark born from respect and courage, had grown into a steady flame that warmed every corner of their home. The ranch, which had once seemed modest and struggling, was now a place of abundance. The fields stretched green and fruitful, the animals thrived under their care, and the home itself, though simple, carried a sense of warmth, laughter, and safety that no grand house could have offered. Every morning, Clara awoke to the soft light of dawn spilling over the hills, and for the first time in her life she felt a sense of belonging that ran deeper than anything she had known as a child. Clara often thought about her past. She remembered the loneliness of being unwanted, the heavy words of relatives, and the whispers of townspeople who had dismissed her because she had no dowry or family name. Those memories still stung at times, but they no longer held power over her heart. Instead, they reminded her of the strength she had discovered within herself. She had endured hardship with patience and kindness, and now she was living a life filled with respect, love, and purpose. Samuel had been the first person to truly see her, to recognize her worth when the world had not. His choice to claim her as his own had changed everything, not just for her, but for both of them. The couple had built a family together. Their children grew up surrounded by love, guidance, and the values that Clara and Samuel held dear. Clara taught them to care for others, to work hard, and to be humble even in moments of success. Samuel showed them how honesty, courage, and persistence could overcome the hardest obstacles. Together, they created an environment where mistakes were met with patience, challenges were faced with determination, and love was abundant in every corner of their home. The children never had to wonder about their worth or the strength of the bond that held their family together. They witnessed it every day in the lives of their parents. The village, which had once looked down upon Clara and Samuel, now began to change its view of them. Neighbors who had whispered cruel words about Clara's orphan status now spoke of her with admiration. They saw how she had transformed her life, how she had embraced her role not as a servant but as a partner and mother, and how she had brought warmth, generosity, and care to everyone around her. Samuel, too, gained respect for the courage he had shown in stepping forward and choosing Clara, despite the doubts and judgments of others. People began to recognize that true strength and value were not measured by wealth, family names, or appearances, but by character, heart, and actions. The couple became an example of integrity, perseverance, and love that inspired many. Life on the ranch was not without its challenges. Storms sometimes destroyed crops, animals grew sick, and there were days when fatigue and worry threatened to overwhelm them. But Clara and Samuel faced every difficulty together. They lifted each other when spirits were low, shared laughter even in hard times, and reminded each other of the joy that came from simple pleasures. The struggles they encountered only strengthened their bond, proving again and again that a life built on mutual respect, care, and partnership could endure any trial. They had learned that happiness was not a gift from wealth or status, but the result of love, commitment, and shared effort. As the seasons continued to change, Clara's heart swelled with gratitude. She thought about the little girl she had once been, the one who had been lonely, overlooked, and treated as if she were invisible. That child would have never imagined that one day she would stand in a home filled with laughter, surrounded by children who adored her, and with a husband who had never failed to see her worth. Samuel's decision to claim her as his wife had not only given her a family, but it had also given her a sense of dignity and belonging that no one else had ever offered. Each day she thanked him silently for having the courage to make that choice, and she vowed to live in a way that honored both their lives. Samuel, for his part, never regretted his decision. He had taken a risk, going against the expectations of others, and in doing so he had gained a partner whose strength, kindness, and courage enriched every part of his life. He watched Clara care for their children, tend the fields, and help neighbors with the same gentle heart he had first noticed years ago. He saw her laugh freely, no longer burdened by the cruel words of the past, and he felt a deep pride in the life they had built together. Their love was quiet, steady, and enduring, a force that held their family and home together through all of life's changes. The children grew up carrying the lessons of their parents into the world. They learned that kindness and honesty mattered more than wealth, that courage and determination could overcome hardship, and that true love was not measured by appearance or status, but by the depth of care and commitment shared between two people. Clara and Samuel often watched them with quiet pride, knowing that their legacy was not only the thriving farm or the home they had built, but the character, strength, and heart that they had instilled in the next generation. Clara also found joy in giving back to the community that had once overlooked her. She helped widows, comforted lonely children, and offered food and support to those who were struggling. Samuel joined her whenever he could, lending his hands and his heart to make a difference. Together they created a ripple of kindness and generosity that touched many lives, reminding the village that strength was not only in labor and land, but in love and care for others. Their story became a quiet legend, a reminder that one act of courage, choosing to see someone's worth, could change countless lives for the better. As the years moved on, the couple faced the natural challenges of aging, but their bond never wavered. Each wrinkle, Each line and each gray hair became a testament to a life well lived together, full of shared joys, struggles, and triumphs. Clara would often hold Samuel's hand as they watched the sunset over the hills, thinking of how far they had come from the days of loneliness and whispers. Samuel would squeeze her hand gently, reminding her silently that every hardship, every quiet moment of struggle had led them to the rich, fulfilling life they now shared. Eventually, the tale of Clara and Samuel spread beyond the village. People from neighboring towns came to see the woman who had been unwanted and the rancher who had chosen her. They heard the story of courage, kindness, and love that had transformed two lives and created a thriving family and home. Some were inspired to act with more compassion in their own lives. Others were reminded of the quiet strength that can live within those who are overlooked. Clara and Samuel never sought fame or recognition. They simply lived honestly, worked hard, and loved deeply, but the impact of their lives was felt far beyond the borders of their ranch. In the end, Clara, the girl who had once been unwanted and dismissed, became a symbol of hope and resilience. She had endured hardship, loneliness, and cruelty, yet she emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than ever. Samuel, the poor rancher who had no wealth to offer, became her partner in life and love, proving that courage, sincerity, and the willingness to see someone's true worth could overcome all obstacles. Together they had built a life rich in love, family, and respect. A life that no one could measure with money, social standing, or appearances, but one that touched the hearts of everyone who knew their story. Their children grew up with laughter in their home, kindness in their hearts, and the lessons of their parents guiding them. The ranch thrived, the community respected them, and the love between Samuel and Clara remained a quiet, powerful force that anchored their lives. Years later, when villagers told the story of the orphan girl who no one wanted and the poor rancher who claimed her, it was told not as a tale of pity, but as a story of courage, vision, and the extraordinary power of choosing love when the world fails to see it. Clara's life, once filled with hardship, had transformed into a life of hope, meaning, and fulfillment. Samuel's choice had changed everything, not just for them but for generations to come, and so, the girl who had been unwanted and the poor rancher who had nothing but a heart full of courage left a legacy far richer than anyone could have imagined. Their story remained a reminder that the greatest treasures in life are not money, status, or appearances, but love, respect, and the courage to see the value in someone's heart when the world refuses to. In the quiet fields of their ranch, in the laughter of their children, and in the warmth of their enduring love, Clara and Samuel proved that true happiness and fulfillment come from connection, kindness, and the bravery to choose one another against all odds.